Listening to KX 93.5 Laguna's Only FM. I'm Scott Hayes, and this, of course, is Radio Caravan. And in the house, a little behind schedule.
A little. Whoa.
It's Keith Morrison, of course, the voice, the personality of Dateline NBC and those murder mystery stories, broadcast journalist, long time. You want to tell us why you're a little bit behind schedule this morning, Keith?
Yeah.
Did you just sleep in, or you forget?
I have no answer. You want the truth?
Yeah, sure.
I just flaked. I completely forgot it was today.
Really?
Yeah.
So was my.
So my phone rings.
Yeah.
I was in the shower.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and my wife went by and looked at the phone and said, "There's no caller ID on it." I said, it's probably just they're trying to sell me something. Don't pay any attention to it. Then later I pick up the voice. Oh, my God, it was today.
That's funny.
Yeah, well, it's...
Because we sent an email back and forth like 2 days ago. Just to
I know.
Oh,
I
okay.
know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey,
Age, it does all kinds
of... right, yeah.
Oh, I thought maybe you were out investigating something.
Oh, yeah,
again.
right.
Yeah.
See, I was thinking about using that excuse, and I thought, no, honestly, just be honest. Actually, I must tell you that this particular scenario,
which
is my recurring nightmare. I've had ever since I was started in radio.
Which recurring?
This recurring nightmare of being late for a show.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Since I started having this dream back in about 1967, so it finally came true.
Well, that's interesting.
And you've done.
You've never been late up until this point.
Well, I was once
before
when I first started in radio, and it produced cataclysmic results, and so I've had the dream ever since.
How funny. When I was starting to prep for this show, I sort of reflected back to when I was a budding journalist just out of college. I was a communications major, emphasis in journalism, and I would watch 60 Minutes. It was the Mike Wallace and the Dan Rathers and that hard-nosed ambush-style reporting, and I said, man, this is what I want to do, right? Although I never did actually, do that sort of reporting and writing. But then you came along with your face and your personality and your voice. And I thought to myself, when I first saw you, you're so distinctive and different than all the other broadcast journalists out there. Don't you agree?
No.
What do you mean?
I mean, that's a bad thing, isn't it?
No, it's not. It's a good thing. I think it helps you stand out, I think, in your industry. Don't you believe?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I really... maybe. I don't know.
A little
bit.
Who knows? Did you always want to be a journalist, a reporter?
No, I started out hoping to be a lawyer.
Oh,
wow. Yeah. And so I flunked out of law school.
Oh.
And my next-door neighbor was a newspaper editor, and he had a DUI. So it all worked out. I had to drive him to work. He gave me a job.
And you started as a reporter for a newspaper?
Oh, very briefly. He was actually in transition. He was retiring from the newspaper, and he had already been asked. They'd already asked him if he'd take over as news director of a little radio station in town. And so he went to do that, and I went with him.
And you started, then you moved over to the radio station?
Moved to the radio station, got a chance to do some of those early morning newscasts, which they give the junior guys because nobody else wants to get up that early.
Right.
Slept in. Had the dream.
And then when did you make the transition to broadcast? To television?
To television in, a long time. About 69.
About 69, yeah. Was it a natural fit for you?
TV?
Yeah.
I liked it actually. If I wasn't going to be a lawyer, I wanted to be a preacher. My dad was a preacher. My grandfather was a preacher.
Really?
Yeah. 8 uncles, all of whom were preachers.
Wow.
Yeah, it was one of those families. But you have to sort of be more into it than I was. In any event, because of that, you grow up kind of standing up in the pulpit and reading the lesson and, singing in the choir and doing all of those things. Essentially, performance art is what it is. And one thing leads to another. It was a kind of a natural transition.
But in a sense, performance art isn't what most journalists on TV do, a little bit of performance
Well,
art
of course
as well?
they do. That's a...
Yeah.
I don't talk about it, but that's what it is.
Yeah.
And essentially, you're taking information you've either developed or somebody else has handed to you. It's
Right.
or you've maybe edited a bit from somebody. It's a wide variety.
Yeah.
You don't know whether when you're listening to a radio station or watching television, you have no idea whether the person who is telling you these things knows what they're talking about or not, whether they developed it or not, whether they're the reporter, the writer, the reader. In essence, you have to be able to. The whole role then is simply to present the information in a way that people are going to engage with. So regardless of how you got it.
So when we see you on television and on those mystery type stories, are we looking at your natural personality, or are we looking at something that has been developed professionally over time?
Good question.
Yeah, good. I have no idea.
Well, think about it for a moment, though. You have a sense.
I have no idea.
We handle everything from general corporate formation, partnership, real estate. We have a full-service litigation practice, and we also have a group of lawyers that handle bankruptcy and general insolvency matters.
We offer big firm experience with a small firm feel.
The person that you're hiring is the person who's going to be representing you throughout your entire map.
The slogan of redefining full service attempts to capture two things. One, an explanation of the breadth or the diversity of the legal services that we provide, but also to recognize that our service to our community does not end with our legal services.
Whether it's a pro bono opportunity where we're representing people for free, or whether we're actually volunteering on a project like Habitat for Humanity, for example.
It includes the philanthropic efforts, the volunteering of time, and the donating of resources outside just the four corners of this law office.
Hey, so how long have you been involved sort of in these murder mystery genres now with Dateline?
I've been doing long-form TV for a long time, but I joined Dateline I was working part-time for them as early as when they started, which was back in, I don't need these things, do I?
Not necessarily, yeah.
Back in 92, 93, and then we, it gradually morphed into the murder mysteries because that's what people wanted to watch. So I used to love doing the animal stories, stories about wolves and bears and
Really?
whales. We did a whole series about what happened to the real Free Willy whale, and it was a wonderful story full of all kinds of pathos and the way it ended. Followed that for a long time, and I loved that kind of stuff. I'd covered politics for years, and animals seemed like so much better.
Yeah.
But then, I guess it was about somewhere between 15 and 20 years ago, it just became apparent that what people wanted to watch were murder mysteries.
And was this a genre that was developed specifically for you? Were you involved in the initial sort of discussions of that genre? How did that?
No, it was a organic change.
Okay.
We'd do one of those stories, and they did well. I guess I recall realizing as I was doing this that it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. What was fun about
Fun
it?
is probably a bad word
No,
to use
but
because
yeah, that's
some
interesting.
terrible thing happened. But the thing is that these stories reveal so much more about what human character is all about than so many others do. And it allows you to get fairly deeply into people's personalities. You can ask incredibly intimate questions of them, and they will answer, even though you've just met them and won't be seeing them again. And you've got cameras pointed at them from all over the place. But as a result of that, you interview politician or a whale, and you're really not going to get very much out of them. They're about the same, really.
Right.
Good analogy there.
Yeah, but these are, you know,
Why do
tell
you
you more about how humans tick. That's all.
Why do you suppose? I mean, I've written most of my adult life, and I've interviewed a number of different types of people as well. And people who suffer tragedies or go through tragedies oftentimes are more than willing to share their story, and it
Yeah.
always surprises me. Why do you think in the
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I guess I know to some degree. It's because you have to talk about that person. Otherwise, they didn't matter as much. And of course they matter. They matter tremendously. And it honors a person who has died. That's why we get together and have memorials and wakes and funerals, because it's a really important thing to talk about the departed.
Yeah.
I remember being sent out. We used to call them, you'll have to do the pickup today. And I hated that so much when I was a kid. The pickup meant that somebody, a school crossing guard was killed or something. And it becomes the pickup person's job to go to that person's house and talk to the widow and say, do you have a photograph we can use on television of your dear departed husband? And you'd be sweating bullets going to the door thinking, what a cretin I am.
Yeah.
A low life, this is horrible, taking advantage of somebody's grief. But 9 times out of 10, you get invited in and you'd be having tea and crumpets for a couple hours.
It's like writing an obit for a newspaper, same sort of
Kinda, yeah.
concept. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I've always found that it's cathartic, oftentimes,
It
for
is,
the
yeah.
people who are expressing their grief or sorrow
Right.
at
That's a
that
good
particular
point.
time.
Very much so.
And
we will go on in interviews for sometimes 2-3 hours and more.
Mm-hmm.
So you get a chance to get pretty deeply into all
That's
kinds of
interesting.
things.
Do you develop? I mean, I gotta believe you're pretty well versed and well researched prior to going into the interviews. And you said 2 to 3 hours. That 2 or 3 hours yields about how much time on the actual show? Would you say?
It depends.
Yeah.
Sometimes they don't get used at all. Occasionally it'll become the spine of the story, the narrative force. Frequently, you wind up using 2 or 3 minutes of it.
And how do you find developing the questions to yield? Do you develop the questions to yield sort of the responses you're looking for?
No. That'll kill the story.
Yeah.
You'll go off track pretty fast. No, the whole point is to learn what you can learn,
Right.
and to let the story lead you where it wants to go.
People don't get paid for these interviews.
No.
Yeah. And editing is a big part of that production process, I've got to believe.
Yes, absolutely. Well, it used to be film and then videotape, and now it's, what is it? Now it's some kind of digital something. or
Something
other.
digital, huh?
But there'll be hundreds of hours of this digital stuff, which happily I don't go through. But
I was just going to
somebody
ask,
does.
you don't go through the editing of the interviews?
Well, I do, but not until it's so whittled down that
Gotcha.
we have
That makes
the best
sense.
choices to choose from.
Yeah. And do you have any techniques for your interview process? I know Mike Wallace once said that he loved to sort of ask the question, and then when the interviewee was done, he would pause because he found people got nervous.
Actually, yes. You let them fill in the blanks. And that's one of the luxuries of a non-live interview that will go on for as long as you want it to go on, because you have the luxury of waiting for somebody to. That's when people reveal things or make their Freudian slips or something, because at that point they're trying to explain things. Like,
Yeah. And, sometimes I teach feature writing or news reporting at the college level. And I always say part of being a good interviewer is also the ability to listen, to ask the follow-up questions, because if you're so set on your list of questions like I have here, you don't hear where the direction of the interview might take.
Yeah.
Are you more a storyteller or are you more a reporter? Or both?
You have to be both, I think. I mean, I don't know whether it works, but it has to be.
You enjoy the mystery genre?
Yeah, I'm embarrassed to say
Yeah.
yes. I love it.
Yeah.
Does it ever go home with you? So you have all these deep, dark, twisted stories from what seems to be ordinary people, and then they come out and they have,
Yeah,
does
they-
it ever go home and haunt you at night? And,
Well, it comes home.
yeah.
We talk about it. Yeah,
Oh, I bet.
it's. There are some very unusual people in the world,
Yeah.
but ordinary, usual, normal people are capable of doing things you would not imagine
creepy.
they could do.
How long does it take to produce a show? Once you come up with a concept for a show, how long is that entire process before it actually
Well,
gets ready to be aired?
all these corporations that own television networks are trying to shrink them a little bit these days because they want to maximize profits. Long answer here. Not really.
Take your time.
But it means that we don't have quite as many people around to do this as we used to do. But I think of Dateline as this big organism, huge machine, and it'll either leave me and my little team of people alone to do a story over a period of a couple months or 3 months or 4 months, or follow it for several years and then finally gradually cobble something together. Some of these stories we follow for a decade or more before we actually put them on TV. But then something will happen and the boss will call up and say, we want to have something on the air this Friday. And it's Monday. And they want not just a story on, they want 2 hours of highly polished television on that Friday night.
Wow.
And at the first few times that demand was made, everybody went into complete panic mode.
I'm sure.
Think, we can't possibly do this. This is the end. We're dead. But the machine goes into, into high gear, and it's remarkable. It's like you're riding. It's like you're in the cockpit of a jet plane, and you don't really know how to fly the thing, but there it is, and it's doing everything it has to do. And you say, I'd like to go this way, and the whole thing just got. So that by Friday, this big organism has put together 2 hours of really
That's
good TV.
incredible.
How many projects do you juggle at any one time?
I usually have about 25
No.
stories. Well, at some stage. Some
Yeah.
of them you're just watching.
Of course, yeah.
Some you're actively working on.
You're working on the reporting, you're working on the interviews, you're working
Uh-huh.
on the production, you're working on the editing.
Yeah,
You're working
it's
all
in
of
some stage or other.
about
yeah.
25, or roughly you juggle about 25?
It varies, but it could be that many, or sometimes down to 15 or so. If it gets too low, I get worried.
What do you think makes a great show?
Oh Lord, the one it makes it. It's the one that makes people watch.
Well,
Good
in my
answer.
humble opinion, that would be you oftentimes, because let's be honest.
very kind,
yeah,
thank you.
yeah. But what do you think in terms of content? I mean, there's a lot of these sort of murder packaged, the wife kills the husband types of stories out there. What separates the ones you use from those that you don't go after? What elements are there that you need?
I often wonder that myself. You just don't know. There's a committee. We'll pitch stories. I pitch stories all the time, but
Okay.
there's a committee of people who meets in New York every weekday morning, and they go over lists of pitches that people give them, and take maybe 1 out of 10. But I usually think that there are 5 other ones that get rejected that really should have been done. You don't know. I mean, there are all kinds of elements that can go into making a good story, and it's different in every one.
Have you ever been completely disturbed by one particular story that you worked on or produced?
Lots of them, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyone that stands out?
Some make you angry. Some are just disturbing. I talked to a serial killer once who was about a month away from execution, who I guess had decided, although he wouldn't reveal it before, I decided that he was going to kind of admit the kind of person he was. And he decided he was going to tell me the story of his first kill, the first time he murdered somebody. And it was a particularly ugly crime. but he enjoyed it so much, as he was
Wow.
telling me, that it was disturbing.
And so as you're sitting there face to face, I'm assuming in his prison cell somewhere in that
Yeah.
facility, asking these questions and hearing sort of the glee in his voice as he describes
Right.
his first killing, you
I'm
still,
wondering, what am I doing here?
I was just going to say, you still have to maintain a sense of professionalism during that interview, yes?
Yeah, sure, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you ever get critiqued by people around you? Because why did you interview that person, or why did you give credence or airtime to this person over here? You ever get that sort of feedback?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just sort of brush it off?
Well, it depends. Sometimes people are right. You said something earlier about the important part of interviewing people is listening. It's the important part of the whole process, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Hey, according to your or to the company's website, your profile, you've interviewed everybody from the president
Oh, Lord, that thing.
to prime ministers, to criminals, to artists, to actors, to authors, etc. Of all of these interviews you've conducted throughout your career, which one stands out as the most memorable?
You know, a lot of people ask that question, and I don't know.
Well-
a lot of them do. To say,
To pick one over another is difficult.
yeah,
Pick one that you
it is.
particularly liked or didn't like, or was interesting.
Yeah. There's usually a long story behind all of them.
Okay.
But I won't go there.
Okay, well, let me ask you this then. Who do you consider to be the most famous person you ever interviewed?
Joe DiMaggio, probably. Yeah.
Joe DiMaggio. Are you a baseball
I
fan?
think Joe DiMaggio is one of those transcendent figures who somehow, over the course of generations, even though he's a baseball player, and didn't make earth-shaking decisions about the world, somehow becomes more important than a lot of those so-called important people.
How was that interview?
It was actually wonderful. It occurred. It was lucky. It was right before the earthquake up in San Francisco. You remember the
Sure.
the World Series that was disrupted?
I was on the golf course around that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I went up the week before to do a story about how San Francisco was getting ready, do a story for the nightly news, and we were trying to figure out something different to do. And I was walking through the hotel where we were staying, and there was a barber shop on the main floor of the hotel. And looking through the window of the barber shop as I walked past, and there's Joe DiMaggio sitting in the chair. Well, he was known to be somebody who was very private, didn't like to be interviewed, and was often asked and always said no. And I walked away, and I was scared, frankly, to go and talk to him because this reputation, and I didn't want to be intrusive and didn't want to be an ass,
Can we say that?
So, can we? Yeah.
I think we
I
can.
didn't use the last part.
We were talking about it this morning. Yeah. We figured you'd be the problem.
Yes. Well, so anyway, I went in and I just blurted it out, and he said yes. And the reason he said yes was because one of the enfants terribles of baseball was just being a jerk, a very public jerk during that period of time.
Who was this? Who would this have been? Okay.
And he wanted to talk about it. So we arranged, and we went out to he was golfing that afternoon, so he let us follow him around as we're golfing. And he talked about his life and about the way to play baseball, the way not to be
Really?
a public figure, how he felt about people who hot dogged all the time.
Right.
It was wonderful. These great anecdotes, and I've never forgotten that.
I always vet the guests before they come in. I go online and do as much research as I can. The website BuzzFeed wrote an article titled 19 Reasons Dateline's Keith Morrison is Television's Greatest Gift to Mankind.
Wow.
Have you read this?
BuzzFeed.
So I'm going to read you just a couple. I'll get a quick response from this. Number one, his voice has the lilting tone of a beloved grandpa telling a fascinating story by the campfire. True?
Oh, I don't know. What? True?
There's something to his delivery that makes you suspect he might have a few bodies buried somewhere himself. He's totally unafraid to rock a black leather jacket.
Sexy, sexy.
He recorded the single greatest reading of The Night Before Christmas. Is that true?
You
You
know,
did that?
that wasn't very good, actually, that reading.
Oh,
I,
okay.
I was annoyed with myself, yeah.
You were? You were
Yeah,
asked
that-
to you were asked to read that?
I was coming. Well, the story behind that was somebody had asked for it on some viewer or something, and so my boss, I was on my way home from a shoot, and I got a message in Dallas, in between airplanes. When you get back tonight, would you go over to this certain such and such a location and record The Night Before Christmas on video because some viewers asked for it. So I went, I got there, they handed me a book, we recorded it, and I went home thinking, well, it was going to go on Twitter or something, or, you know,
Right.
anyway. And it's become this thing where it's on, I don't know where it is, but
funny.
it's
Seems
played
like-
all the time, and it could have been better, you know.
It can always be better, but it seems like everything you tackle becomes this thing, in a sense. All right, so last thing, we got about 2 minutes here. Someone online in an online forum wrote the following, that you can make almost any story sound creepy and interesting. And they sort of asked, how do you do it?
You put on your creepy voice, that's all.
So I thought, if you were receptive, we got 1 minute or 2 minutes here. If you were receptive, I've printed out 3 things that you could, one of the 3 you could read in your
Okay.
sort of
In the
creepy,
creepy voice?
interesting
Yeah.
voice, whatever you decide. One is a fable titled The Bald Man and the Fly. The other one is a Springsteen, his shortest lyrics, Bruce Springsteen's song, I'm on Fire. And the third one is How to Trim Your Toenails.
Oh,
Well, they
Which
all
one-
sound pretty good.
They're
Yeah.
all interesting. Any of those 3 you
Intriguing.
could read for us online? We can
Well,
catch.
yeah, okay, I got to look at them first.
Oh,
right?
okay.
Let me see.
All right, he's reading, he's looking at them. They're all very short.
Wash your feet and dry them thoroughly before trimming your toenails. Use the proper tool to cut your nails, such as nail clippers or manicure scissors. It's too dangerous to use other sharp cutting tools, such as razor blades or knives, or regular scissors.
That's beautiful. Try I'm on Fire.
sounds like someone lost a toe.
Oh, no, that's just too sick. Hey, little girl, is your daddy home? No, let me see.
It's a classic song.
Tell me now, baby, is he good to you? Can he do to you the things I don't do? I can take you higher, though. Oh, 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 I'm on fire, I'm on fire.
Golf clap here. Woo! That's beautiful.